Welcome to HMS, let the power flow. Feel the rhythm in your veins. Every rapid nitro flame.
Okay, so in today's video, we're looking at the application of strategy and tactics, okay? And specifically, what are the things that can affect how strategy and tactics are implemented. So I've covered this in a previous video, but just to remind you and to recall what these terms mean. So we've got strategy and we've got tactics, and they are different. Strategy is the game plan, all right? It's the game plan to be implemented to enable success. Sometimes the game plan may be long-term. So if you're looking at like an Olympic athlete, their strategy that they work with their coach with may be 4 years long, okay? Other times it may be in a game situation, so it may be 80 minutes long, okay? But it's not an immediate thing, all right? Strategies are not things that you just do here and there. Those things are tactics. Tactics are specific decisions and actions taken to enable the strategy to happen, all right? So if you guys watching this video have the strategy of achieving Band 5, Band 6 in HMS, therefore, one of the tactics you may use to achieve that goal is by listening to all the video content, taking comprehensive notes, completing all your worksheets, and handing in practice questions. Those tactics would enable the strategy of you doing well. A sporting example, so constantly using like 3-player advances from dummy half in league, which is a tactic to eventually break down line defensive positions, which would be a strategy and therefore enable success by scoring, hopefully. So there are many ways in which we can implement strategies and tactics. There are many things that influence these. I'm only going to give you 4 today, all right? I think 4 is more than enough that you need to know. And if you can recall 3 of those 4 in an exam situation, then you're doing pretty well. Okay, so the first one I want you guys to remember is athletes' fitness and skill components, okay? It's well and good to have a strategy, and it's well and good to have some tactics in place to implement the strategy, but if your players and your athletes aren't actually up to the physical task of doing that thing, it's not gonna work, okay? So strategies and tactics must align with the physical capabilities of the athletes and players to be successful. So for example, imagine a soccer match, all right? A team goes into the match, they know that the other team, general like past footage, gets tired in like the second half of the second half, okay? So the team goes into the match and like, okay, for the first 70 minutes of the game, we're just gonna focus on ball movement around the field, all right? We're not actually going to take opportunities to score unless it's like presented nicely on a platter. We're just gonna focus on ball movement to make the opposition team run around a whole lot, okay? To enhance the level or the chances that they get fatigued, all right? Because if the other team gets fatigued and they're exhausted, well then that opens up 20 minutes for the other team who should still be feeling fresh, well not fresh, but at least have some energy in reserve to really capitalize on that fatigue and score, okay? It's a good strategy. A lot of boxers do this too, so they will just sort of be defensive for many, many rounds in a match, saving their energy, just, not throwing many punches, and then hopefully get towards the end of the boxing rounds and then knock their opponent out because they're tired, because they've been swinging the whole time. But this only works if the players have high levels of cardiorespiratory endurance, so hence the athlete's fitness and skill component. So if you were the coach and you wanted to implement this type of strategy, you would ensure that your team has had plenty of aerobic fitness development leading up to these types of matches, okay? And then it's likely to work, okay? So that's the first one. Okay, so the second one is health and injury status, okay? So for many athletes and teams especially, the health and injury status of the players are going to dictate how well they're going to be able to implement the strategy and tactics, and sometimes they just can't do it at all right? So if they're heavily influenced by athletes' well-being, if a key player in a certain strategy is injured or they're benched or something, okay? Or if many players on a team have just been training too hard leading up to it and they peaked too early and now they're run down from overtraining, then it may be impossible to actually run with planned tactics, strategies and tactics. So for example, let's say a cyclist, Tour de France, had a game plan of just hanging with the pack for the first 6 legs, and on leg 7, they were going to go all out and sprint, all right? So this whole time they've been just sitting at the back of the pack, okay, conserving energy, using, less drag and wind resistance to make sure that they stay with them, but not really, up in the leaderboards. But leg 7, they'd always planned all along they were going to go all out on leg 7 and hopefully leapfrog a whole bunch of people and end up placing pretty well. That's the strategy that they've decided on. They've trained for it all year. They've led up to the races, but then somehow accidentally in leg 6, the cyclist has actually torn their calf muscle. So now on the next day in leg 7, they can no longer implement the strategy, and they're going to need to think of something else to do, which would probably just conserving in leg 7, leg 8, leg 9, and they may move this strategy to like a later leg when the athlete is feeling fresh. But this is like one example as to how health and injury status can drastically impact the ability for you to implement strategy and tactics. Okay, so the third one, environmental conditions. This one's really easy to remember. So wind, rain, and heat, okay, are going to directly affect strategies and tactics that you implement in different sports, okay? The most obvious one for me is Formula One. So I've given you an example here of like Oscar Piastri must switch from slick tyres to wet or groove tyres after a heavy downpour to ensure his car doesn't aquaplane off the track, okay? So slick tyres, they're used in dry conditions. They enable the car to go faster, especially through corners. Heavily grooved like wets are very chunky, okay? They stop the car from sliding off the track when there's water on the track, but they don't enable the car to go as fast, okay? So this is one of those strategy and tactics that they must sort of determine not only on the day or the morning, but they can continually determine this throughout the race, okay? So the trade-off is that you take a slower tire, so therefore you get a slower time. However, you don't DNF, when do not finish, okay? You don't actually slide off the track, crash your car, and then you're out of the race completely, all right? A lot of times, if you know anything about racing, the drivers and the staff will have sort of discussions and arguments about what's best to do here. Like if they're only a few laps from finishing and it starts pouring and they're on slicks, then they're like, okay, what do I do? Do I pull in and change? Not a few laps, but 10, 20 laps out. Do I pull in and change, or do I stick with what I've got and hope for the best? And that's what strategy and tactics is all about. Okay, so the last one I wanted to recall, which sort of links back into the first one we discussed, is opponent analysis, okay? So who you're actually playing and where you're playing and all that kind of stuff is going to have a drastic impact on the strategy and tactics that you should be implementing, all right? You can't just have the same game plan for every game of a season. It doesn't work, okay? Like you can take general things and apply it to all the games, but then depending on who you're playing, you need to adjust your strategy and tactics to make sure that you get the upper hand. So we're going to analyze opponents or the teams via video footage, okay? Or you can just go and watch them live or whatever, and past performances to enable the creation of more successful strategy and tactics, okay? So example, so let's say playing league, halfback for the opposing side regularly carries the team, okay? They are an amazing player, okay? Let's say they represent Australia. They're very good at reading players, very good at creating opportunities. The rest of the team are just average Joes, but it's this player really like sets them up. Let's just say they're a freak, okay? So therefore, the strategy is to lock them down. And we're going to do that with tactics such as 2-on-1 rush defense for the whole match, all right? So 2 players are going to be designated at every single tackle to rush out, and don't give this person space. Don't give them time. Don't give them anything. You just rush in them all match. And then obviously if those 2 players who are designated start to get tired, you sub some people in to take their role on rushing the defense. Because if this player doesn't get time to read what's going on, doesn't get space to move and pass the ball, then the other team aren't going to be very successful. All right. So that's one way that opponent analysis can be used to implement strategy and tactics for success. And that will finish our video of how the application of strategy and tactics is influenced by many factors. Thanks.